Somewhere beyond the edge of the solar system, in a darkness so complete and so vast that the sun itself is just another star, a machine was reporting something impossible. The data came home the way it always did, crawling across the void for nearly a full day at the speed of light, and when the engineers on Earth read it, it made no sense. The spacecraft was telling them it was confused. Its system for knowing which way it was pointed, the part that kept its antenna aimed back at the tiny pale dot of home, was sending back readings that were garbled, randomized, impossible. According to its own telemetry, the spacecraft did not know where it was looking. And yet, and here is the thing that made the engineers lean in and go quiet, everything else was fine. The signal was strong. The antenna was clearly still pointed at Earth because they were receiving it loud and clear. The spacecraft was flying perfectly, healthy, stable, doing everything right. It was behaving like a patient who walks into the room, vitals perfect, steady on their feet, and calmly tells you that according to their own eyes the room is upside down. This was Voyager 1, the most distant object humanity has ever built, and in 2022 it started sending home a signal that should not have been possible. Stay with me, because unraveling this one took months, and the answer is stranger and more human than you would ever guess. To feel why this was so unnerving, you have to understand the distance, because the distance is the whole story. Voyager 1 launched in 1977, a machine with less computing power than the key fob to a modern car, and it has been flying outward ever since. It is now so far away, more than 15 billion miles, that its radio signal, moving at the speed of light, the fastest thing in the universe, takes around 22 hours to reach us. Picture the cruelty of that for the people trying to help it. You notice something wrong. You carefully compose a command to ask a question. You send it out into the black, and it travels for the better part of a day before it even arrives. Then the spacecraft answers, and that answer takes the better part of another day to crawl back. A single question and its reply is a 2-day conversation across a gulf so wide the human mind cannot really hold it. And the thing you are talking to is a 45-year-old machine, alone, in the cold between the stars, that has just started telling you something that cannot be true. There is no reset button you can walk over and press. There is no technician you can send. There is only the whisper across the dark, and the waiting. Here is exactly what was happening, because the specifics matter. On board Voyager 1, there is a system called the Attitude Articulation and Control System, a mouthful that the engineers shortened to a few letters, and its job is simple to state and vital to survival. It keeps the spacecraft oriented. It makes sure the antenna stays locked onto Earth, because if that antenna ever drifts too far off target, the connection breaks, and a spacecraft you cannot talk to is a spacecraft you have lost forever. This system was doing its actual job perfectly. The antenna was aimed true. The spacecraft was stable and pointed exactly where it needed to be, but the status reports this system was sending back about itself had turned to nonsense. It was generating readouts that looked randomly generated, that did not reflect any possible real state the spacecraft could be in. The machine was functioning flawlessly, while simultaneously insisting, in its own telemetry, that something was deeply wrong. And that contradiction is a genuine nightmare for an engineer, because you cannot tell if you are looking at a small reporting glitch or the first tremor of a catastrophic failure in a machine you can never physically reach. Is the patient fine and just misreading their own chart? Or is this the first sign the whole system is about to collapse? From 15 billion miles away, with a 2-day delay on every question, you have to find out using nothing but patience and reason. So that is what they did. The team began the slow, painstaking work of interrogating a machine across the emptiness of interstellar space, and it is worth sitting with just how much patience this demands. Every hunch they wanted to test, every diagnostic they wanted to run, meant sending a command and then waiting nearly 2 days to see the result. Weeks passed, then months. They pored over the garbled data, looking for a pattern in the nonsense, trying to understand not just that the system was misreporting, but why, and where the bad information was coming from. And slowly, they began to narrow it down. They came to understand that the attitude control system itself was healthy. The problem was not that it had broken. The problem was in the data it was sending. The readouts were being corrupted somewhere in the process, before they reached Earth. And then they found the culprit, and the culprit was the kind of thing that makes this whole story so strangely human. The attitude control system had, for some reason, started routing its telemetry data through a computer on board that was known to be broken, a computer that had stopped working years earlier. The system was taking its perfectly good information and sending it through a dead component, and that dead component was scrambling it into garbage on the way out. The spacecraft was fine. It was just, in effect, trying to speak through a broken translator, and everything came out as nonsense. But notice what that answer does and does not give you. They knew what was happening. They still did not know why. Why, after 45 years, would the spacecraft suddenly start sending its data through a computer that had been dead for years? What made it choose that broken path? And this is where you have to be honest, because the honest answer is one that scientists are often reluctant to say out loud, but said here plainly. They were not entirely sure. The best understanding is that a command, at some point, was issued with a tiny error, or that the aging system faulted in a way that shunted the data down the wrong path. Out there, exposed for decades to the radiation of deep space, subjected to the slow wear of time on hardware built before the personal computer existed, small strange failures happen, and sometimes you cannot fully reconstruct the exact chain of events that caused them. What mattered was that they had found where the corruption was entering, and that meant they could do something about it. They could command the attitude control system to stop sending its data through the dead computer and start routing it correctly again. It was a fix born of understanding, reached across 15 billion miles, for a problem whose deepest cause remained partly a mystery. And it worked. In the late summer of 2022, they sent the command out into the dark, and then they waited the long 2 days, and when the answer finally came home, the data was clean. Readable. Sensible again. The spacecraft was reporting its own status correctly for the first time in months. The nonsense had stopped. Voyager 1 was once again telling the truth about itself, and the engineers back on Earth could breathe. They had diagnosed a machine that was lying to them without meaning to, from a distance so vast that light itself needs the better part of a day to cross it, and they had talked it back to health 1 2-day whisper at a time. And here is what I want you to take from this, because it is the real answer underneath the impossible headline. The signal that should not have been possible was not a message from something out there in the dark. It was the machine itself, aging, wounded in a way no one could immediately explain, trying to tell us it was fine using a voice that had broken. The mystery was real. For months, scientists genuinely could not explain what they were seeing, but the resolution was not aliens, and it was not some cosmic riddle beyond human understanding. It was a group of people who refused to give up on a 45-year-old machine that most of the world had long forgotten was still flying. They sat with a problem they could not touch, thought their way through nonsense that made no sense, and found the one broken path scrambling the words of the most distant traveler we have ever made. Voyager 1 carries a golden record, a message meant for whoever might one day find it drifting between the stars. But the truest message of Voyager is not on that disk. It is in what happened in 2022, when the farthest thing we have ever built started speaking in tongues, and we listened, and we did not look away, and we brought it back. It is still out there right now, still flying, still speaking, and we are still listening.